Hey friends, Dean here. Before we get you on to your episode, I want to take a moment to invite you to our next virtual online trivia night. Wednesday, May 13th at 8 p.m. Join us either on our Facebook group or on our YouTube page for 3 rounds of fun trivia, music questions, movie questions, general knowledge questions. It'll be a fun time and a chance to win some prizes and have just a good relaxing night of some trivia at home. You don't even have to go out for it. So don't forget, Wednesday, March 13th at 8 p.m. Join us on our Facebook group or YouTube for 3 rounds of fun virtual online trivia. We'll see you there. We record the show on Mondays, but in this episode, we're talking about Tuesday. Sheryl Crow's fantastic album, Tuesday Night Music Club, to be precise. Stay with us.
Get ready for the 3324 podcast, where lifelong friends Dean Legiro and Eric Kuber share their love of all things music and movies. Dean has directed short films and is a music trivia buff. And Eric, trained in audio engineering, brings his extensive knowledge of music and film to the conversation as they discuss, debate, and celebrate their favorite albums, films, and much more.
Welcome, friends, to the 3324 podcast. You're here with Dean Legiro. Eric Kuber is here as well, right?
I am in the house. I'm in my new house.
In his new house.
Yes.
I'm in the old
Maryland
house.
But we're
he moved into a new house, and I promptly moved into his old house and just took it all. I'm squatting until somebody else shows up and says, well, we live here, and then I'll have to leave. I'll pack up all the equipment.
It's funny you mentioned that, because we had a visitor this weekend. Kelly's best friend came to town and visit, and we told her to do the same thing. She goes, I don't want to go home. So I said, well, hey, you got a nice empty place to go.
There you go.
And crash. So there you go.
There you go. We will not give out the address. We will leave that. You'll have to find it. There you go.
Right.
But so thank you for joining us each week as we present the best in music and movie podcasting. If you don't believe me, take Eric's word for it.
Take my word for it.
He is honest.
What are you saying? You're full of crap?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay. Wow.
Absolutely. But this much is true. We do what we feel present the best in music and movie podcasting. So thank you for joining us each week as we discuss that. Each Monday we have shorter form material that comes out, in most of the time it's a quick hit, which is just some small tidbits of trivia and fun stuff. Enjoy that as well. Complete the whole mission and join us on social media at 3324 podcast on Instagram and Facebook as well. And one last thing, since we're just rolling out all the begging, if you listen to us on Spotify, you can rate us as well. And 1 to 5 stars. In my book, 1 through 4 stars doesn't exist. 5 stars, I think, is the way to go. That's the recommendation. Is 5 stars.
The recommendation, sure, but okay.
Yeah.
No, there's nothing wrong with that. Trying to reach for the
just pretend 1 to 4 doesn't exist, and you just swipe over to 5, and we're good. Everything is great. So anyway, in this week we're talking about I might call it a lost classic, because you had, just before we went on, you had said, "Oh my God, it was so great revisiting this."
Yeah.
And, this was one of my favorite albums when it came out. I mean, Sheryl Crow's Tuesday Night Music Club, which is her debut album. Before we start the conversation proper, let's do what we always do. We give you some factual information, pack it into your brain somewhere, keep it, because you will need it at some point. It'll come up, and then you'll be able to uncork a lot of this information that we give you. So,
is this your favorite part of the episodes?
I think so. It's one of my, I like it.
You love giving the stats.
I love trivia. I love
there you
trivia.
go.
So, and this will, hopefully one of these will stick. And you're like, oh, okay, that's cool. And
yes,
and
sir.
Actually there's some dot connecting, oddly enough, in my research for this, I found out some interesting connections as well, which we'll talk about soon.
Sure.
So anyway, this was released in August of 1993, produced by Bill Bottrell. All songs were co-written by Sheryl Crow. She wrote all of them, but we'll get into the story of why she's not the only writer on those.
Yeah.
This album won 3 Grammys. Record of the Year, Best New Artist, and Best Female Pop Vocal Performance. These number things come in pairs. It hit number 3 on the charts, on the album charts. And then if you take 3 and you multiply it by 2, you'll get the amount of singles that were released from this album. 6 singles were released. In order of release, Run Baby Run, which didn't chart. What I Can Do For You hit number 97, so that basically didn't chart. Then all of a sudden, All I Want to Do was the third single released, hit number 2.
Yeah, that was great.
Then Leaving Las Vegas was released as a single. Although I think it was actually released initially, then re-released, it hit number 60. Strong Enough hit number 5, and then Can't Cry Anymore hit number 36. So there's a lot of weird chart activity going on there. And then it went 7 times platinum. So we're talking in excess of 7 million copies sold. That's a beast.
Yeah.
That's a big one for a debut album.
For a debut,
wow.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
Wow.
Yeah, no doubt.
So let's talk about 1993. Were you on top of this in 93 or where?
The video. All I Want to Do was the MTV, was the music video. That's what did it.
Yeah.
You and I remember distinctly watching that. I might have seen it perhaps before you, but I remember at your house we were watching it together, and it's like, you like this song? Because I liked, because I think I remember asking you, do you like this song? I said, I love this song. Yeah, it's just great, So yeah, we got into it together.
Yeah, and I think that song did it for everybody. I mean, that was all I Want to Do hit number 2, and that was the uncorking for her of her album. That was her third single in. And that was the one that did it. And yeah, this was when MTV still played music videos pretty regularly.
Yeah.
Like that was a way to still get exposure. And All I Want to Do is just a great.
It actually might have been VH1 at that point.
Well, VH1 too.
We saw it, perhaps. Maybe because they were doing what MTV used to do, playing all like, classic artists and things like that. And they had, everything seemed to go there, where MTV started doing the rap thing and more.
Yeah. Is VH1 still around?
I don't think so.
Really?
If it is, they're not playing music either.
Yeah.
I think they're playing. I think the last time I watched VH1, they were playing movies. They were doing like 80s films and things like that. So I think I saw like Breakfast Club or something. Yeah.
For those that don't know, VH1 was like the adult alternative to MTV at the time. It was kind of like, oh, people like watching music videos. So VH1 was kind of like the light FM version, if you will. They played some more of the middle of the road artists and stuff like that. You got to see that. They coexisted together. I kind of,
They did, but you did get to see a lot of some of the artists or some of the videos that we saw back when MTV started, though, because they would do, I think they had their own special groupings of videos. There were certain times of the day where they would play classic.
Yeah, they did the oldies.
Hits, a lot of classic rock. They did. I remember they had their own segment there. So yeah, Sheryl Crow was a natural for that, format.
And that song did it. Yeah. I grabbed the CD. God, I played the shit out of this CD. Wow. Like I remember like this was like, because 93, it's funny because we'll just kind of, I like doing this too. This is a new thing I like to do, is kind of center the conversation around other music that was coming out at that time.
Yeah.
So in 93, you had, wow, I didn't realize it was such a cornucopia. You had grunge really taking hold. Nirvana's In Utero came out in 93. Pearl Jam's second album, Versus, came out in 93. Siamese Dream by Smashing Pumpkins. You had Tool. Yep. But then on the flip side of that, you had the Wu-Tang Clan. You had Snoop Dogg's first album, Doggy Style. You had Janet Jackson's album, Janet, that came out. Bjork's debut album. You had the debut of Counting Crows. Mariah Carey was in the mix as well. Billy Joel's what you consider his last great album, River of Dreams, was coming out. Aerosmith was in the middle of their domination of MTV with Get a Grip. So there was just a lot of different stuff going on in here. How do you have room for a new artist like this who is not alternative? She was not dance. She's not rap. It's kind of a quirky thing for this artist to come in with a debut album in the middle of all this stuff that was going on.
Yeah.
And, win 3 Grammys. This was, again, this was a sensation. All I Want to Do was all over. It was tearing up MTV and VH1, the video. It's just because she's just, I admit I probably had a crush on her back then just because of,
visual, of course. Very easy on the eyes.
Very easy on the eyes, but her musicianship was the thing. And that's the great thing about this album too, is it's not looks. It's not, she's eye candy and this and that. And the other thing, the song is what captured me, right? That single,
Mhm.
All I Want to Do, is what captured me. And then, the fact, that, okay, I got a little bit of a crush on her. She's cute and all that great stuff. But
Yeah.
it was the music first. And how this came about was really kind of very interesting. The album title Tuesday Night Music Club actually explains to you the circumstances about the creation of this. But before we get there, just a little brief history about Sheryl Crow. Do you know who she used to be a backup singer for?
Michael Jackson.
Michael Jackson.
Yep.
87 to 89.
Yeah.
She was a backup singer, and she would sing some of the highlighted stuff, like I guess that song I Just Can't Stop Loving You, right?
Mhm.
Had that and she would come out and be like the featured performer for that and sing.
Yeah.
This is not anything like that.
Right. Well, it seems like she had a lot of that in common with people like Alanis Morissette, right?
Yeah.
I mean, Alanis was sort of poppy when I think she did a couple of dance records.
Yeah.
Her before the monster that was Jagged Little Pill.
Yeah.
But yeah, some of that kind of that similar, but I guess you got to start somewhere, right?
Exactly. Exactly. And she was, before that, she was a music teacher. So tours with Michael Jackson as a backup singer from 87 to 89, and then decides, okay, well, I'm going to throw my hat into the ring as a solo artist. She releases an album, or she records an album with Hugh Padgham, and he's come up, Phil Collins, which he's no slouch for a producer. They recorded an album in 1992. It was unreleasable.
Wow.
It was scrapped. It was not anything that a record company was even remotely interested in.
It's interesting.
And I've never heard anything from it. I don't think it's ever seen anything like, oh, here's some demo tracks or whatever. This thing was just
released,
unreleasable. Yeah. It was like, this is not going to work for us. So in the meantime, you've got an engineer / producer named Bill Bottrell.
Mm-hmm.
Here's where the connections come in. Do you know Bill Bottrell?
I've heard of the name, but okay. I'm not quite clear on.
He was an engineer for ELO. He engineered this. He was the engineer for the single Hold On Tight. He was the engineer for Secret Messages album. He was the engineer for, I think he worked a little bit on Balance of Power as well.
Okay.
He was the engineer for Traveling Wilburys. He was the engineer for Full Moon Fever.
Wow.
Okay. And a lot, when you listen to this album, some of it starts to make a little bit of sense. So he decides to build his own studio in his house, and just for, he had some life changes, getting married, having kids. So he builds a studio, and then he starts like this kind of collective, a think tank, if you will, of just like-minded artists that would come and hang out and just kind of collaborate and just work on things, not really with a particular goal in mind. And they called it the Tuesday Night Music Club.
Wow. That's interesting. Yeah.
And Sheryl Crow got involved with this group. And as they started meeting, eventually what took shape was working on a solid release for her. And that's why if you look at the credits, you'll see songs are credited to like no less than like 3 or 4 people.
Yeah.
Because all these people were a part of the Tuesday Night Music Club, and they were working with her to develop this music, develop this sound, and kind of and workshop all these songs, which is a very interesting thing.
Right. It almost sounds like it's very similar to the whole Laurel Canyon thing, right? I mean, the artists would get together then, like a lot of the folky singer-songwriters back in the day, like in the early 70s, right? I think that's kind of a similar situation there, like Jackson Browne and Linda Ronstadt. And but yeah, that's really cool. That's interesting. I had no idea that's where it came from.
Yeah. See, it's all about the trivia. It is all about the trivia.
About the trivia, indeed.
So that's where the title Tuesday Night Music Club comes from. Literally was the name of the group that would get together and just kind of hang out and workshop stuff. And like I said, when you look at the credits, you can see it. It is almost songwriting by committee, where different musical ideas. Someone would bring one idea, almost like a group. It's almost like they were a group on this record, because you'll see the same like names on the songwriting credits, but they weren't. It was in aid of having Sheryl Crow be able to present an album that would be accepted by the label. And then they also figured, let's get her on the songwriting credits as well, because that's probably where the money will be. If she's going to make any money on this, it'll be songwriting, and then she could pay off the debts that she owed for the first album that got canned.
Yeah, giving her some attention, getting like, I love that. I love collaborative artists who can do that. I love when particular artists, obviously these guys probably saw the talent in her, and maybe they just would, like you mentioned with Hugh Padgham, which I'm really surprised because what a producer engineer he was. And I had, yeah, maybe his production style might have been a little too slick for her, or who knows?
Or maybe it was the material. Maybe she just hadn't had people to bounce ideas off of or learn from.
Yeah.
She's obviously a multi-instrumentalist. She was a music teacher, and she would, on her second album, she played everything. So I don't think that certainly wasn't the concern. It seems like maybe the songwriting and learning about that whole thing may have been what was elusive for her. And collaborating with this group of people for the Tuesday Night Music Club seemed to be the secret sauce that really they were there to support her, give her ideas, but she was the main songwriter. But you'll see when you look at those credits, like I said, I'll drop a link in the show notes to the Wikipedia page so you can really see all the people, because I think they deserve credit. All these members of the Tuesday Night Music Club who get no credit really for this, because there was some animosity as a result of this whole thing too. So that it, particularly surrounding the song "Leaving Las Vegas," right?
I do remember the band or the duo of David and David, with David Bearwald and David Ricketts. And I know Bearwald went on to do some solo work on his own, but Ricketts was still. It almost felt like Fagan and
Becker,
right? I mean, they, it's like they did that album with Rosie Vela, who was a model, but they were a strong presence on that record. It almost feels like the same vibe, kind of thing, where they brought in Gary Katz to produce, and again that that collaborative thing where they're pushing an artist forward, because they see something in her, So, but she's nowhere near as talented as Sheryl Crow, though.
I think it's the same. Well, I think it's I mean, for people, Rosie Vela might be a really obscure reference, but it fits,
right?
Because she had like, I don't know how many albums she had, but her debut was Zazu, I think, right? And that was just
Zazu,
just a really strong release. We're gonna go there. Rosie Vale used to date Jeff Lynne from ELO.
Of course she did. And she was his backing vocalist. She was technically in
ELO as well. So we're gonna
ELO 2000. There it is. Zoom.
Yes, we'll move away. We're gonna move away from the ELO references. Actually, we're gonna head towards another favorite band of mine, I think, for the references, which is really what struck me at the time in '93.
Yeah,
because at the time in '93, and it's one particular song that put this album over the edge for me for some reason. When I heard the song, I said, let me see if you can guess. I heard a particular, I don't think we ever talked about it. So I don't, and if we did, it was so long ago that maybe you've forgotten, but maybe you remember. There was one particular song on this album. When I heard it, I said, this song can be easily found on Fleetwood Mac's Tusk album. I said, it would absolutely fit in. And at the time I was thinking, because Fleetwood Mac was dormant, I'm like, if Fleetwood Mac needs somebody, they can get Sheryl Crow to join.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what song I'm thinking of?
I'm gonna say
it absolutely fits with Tusk.
Nana song?
No. Strong Enough.
Okay.
Strong Enough absolutely has that acousticy.
Oh yeah.
Feel that Tusk was getting. The way it's arranged, the kind of understated vocals of it with the harmonies, it totally put me like in a Fleetwood Mac mindset. I'm like, she's kind of like she could be a Fleetwood Mac 2.0, which for me kind of centered this album for me. And then when I was listening to it, I'm like, okay, like that was like all I want to do kind of got me in the door, but Strong Enough kind of was the hook that kept me listening for more, because I'm like, wow, this really kind of connected. I'm like, wow, this was like something I wasn't expecting, because Fleetwood Mac had been out of the public eye for so long. Yeah. That for me, I was like, oh, this kind of sounds like it, and it's something I can grab onto and something I can connect with.
I would further say, or argue, not argue, but I mean, there are plenty of songs on this record that I was going for the more quirky kind of thing. So she kind of does both, right? She has a little bit of Lindsay and a little bit of Stevie in her, and she would not. I know she's a big Fleetwood Mac fan. I know her and Stevie Nicks are tight, so
I thought at the time she absolutely could have been a replacement.
Oh yeah,
or an add-on if they wanted to expand. And I never think about that. I never think about who can join Fleetwood Mac. I never ever think about that.
Yeah,
but when this came out, I'm like, wow, she could just fit right in. Like that would be great.
Yeah.
You know,
Sure.
she has the right, like that whole California aesthetic, but 20 years later, you know,
Yeah.
with everything that's going on with the Eagles and Linda Ronstadt, had she been younger, she would have fit right in with that crew, Jackson Browne and all those. Sheryl Crow would have been a natural fit. The fact that it was, you know, almost 20 years later was nice for me because it was a resurgence and it was something that was new and recent and contemporary, but still had some of the connections for me, what I was listening to.
I think we talked about this in the past. I think she would, you know, she would have been a great collaborator with Lindsay, I think, but I don't think she would have put up with his bullshit.
Then she wouldn't have been.
No way, you know, because I know she's been with some of the best, and
well, she dated Clapton.
She dated Clapton, and she dated his protege Doyle Bramhall, because he co-produced an album with her further down the road, 10 miles to Memphis, or 100 miles to Memphis rather. So that was, yeah, but she's right now, I don't think she's dating anyone. I know she's got a couple of children, but she's always, to me, she always seemed like the lone wolf. She was always, she kind of went from one thing to another, kind of her career.
Yeah, she's of her own mind. And
yeah, she's had some ups and downs.
She's collaborated with Kid Rock.
Yeah.
You know, I was just watching a music video with her. It's recent. Her and Bonnie Raitt and Mavis Staples did a song together.
Yeah. Yeah.
So she is not afraid to cross boundaries, cross genres, do different things because she's got the talent. She's got the musicianship. She plays bass, she plays guitar, all that great stuff.
She's formidable knowledge of music. Obviously, she's a huge fan of all the stuff that we like. Apparently, you know, I mean, she grew up in the 70s and, you know, that kind of thing. So yeah, I mean, and she kind of did it all, really. I mean, little bits of this, little bits of that, and made it her own. And it was just,
so
really good stuff. So
there is not a pot of gold at the end of the Tuesday Night Music Club rainbow, though, unfortunately, because what did happen is a lot of acrimony and animosity did develop as a result of this album.
Yeah.
Specifically because of the song Leaving Las Vegas. Okay.
Right. Mm-hmm.
That was the title was inspired by the novel Leaving Las Vegas, which was also the film with Nicolas Cage.
Yeah.
And the story goes is that Sheryl Crow was on, you know, Letterman or one of those, you know, late night shows, and she played that song, and then they asked her like about it, and she says, "Oh yeah, no, it was very autobiographical about me," and that pissed off, you know,
Dave
one of the writers.
Yeah.
That, you know, a lot of them, it kind of rubbed them the wrong way that she was kind of taking the credit for it in a roundabout way. Maybe the lyrics were, but specifically the title obviously wasn't. It was inspired by that author, and that author actually ended up ending his life like not a couple of weeks after this incident. It wasn't related, but all this stuff kind of got jumbled together, and pretty much that crew, you know, pretty much kind of disavowed her, you know, and for her second album, she ended up writing everything pretty much herself. Bill Bottrell hung on for part of the second album, but then also kind of distanced himself from her. And then she played like almost every instrument on the second album, except for drums, which I think Jim Keltner played. He was a traveling Wilbury.
Yeah, I think he, but that's when she also collaborated with Jeff Trott, who would be a mainstay with her, like along most of her work, because he's a constant collaborator, songwriting collaborator with her. But yeah, and I think she grew from that experience, because I actually prefer the second album.
Really?
You know, but myself, yeah, I really, to me, there was kind of a growth there for her. You know,
well, yeah,
I mean, not that I don't.
That she could do it. Like she could. Yeah. She proved that she didn't need. You know, that the collaborators helped her, but now this was kind of her leaving the nest, because the second album has, you know, a change would do you good if it makes you happy. Every day is a winding road. So she was able to really crank out the hits on her own and on her own terms. On that second album, she really did it.
That is my absolute favorite song by her is "Make You Happy." I just
great vocal, heavy guitars.
Her vocal, and that's the thing about you know, that's the one thing I guess she's got a beautiful voice, no doubt, but I wish she had a little bit more range to her voice in terms of like being able to kind of do, you know, different things every once in a while, given the amount of how eclectic she, you know, her songwriting is and what the music suggests, you know. So her voice doesn't, it kind of stays the same though. Like, cause she'll try to do something funky, and then she'll try to do like a kind of like a soul type of thing.
Yeah, but she never goes down low or really does any
She,
modulating with her voice.
Right,
She's kind of like,
but sometimes, maybe she just, it's like, well, I don't know how to do, or not that I don't know how, but I can't. So there's nothing wrong with that. So at least she's,
and not to say that her voice isn't expressive, because it very much is. I mean, on Tuesday Night Music Club, like you had said, it is there's such a diverse a range of styles and types of music on this album that you get all different types of looks. I mean, from Leaving Las Vegas, which is really kind of not much to do as far as singing. It's closer to singing spoken. Yeah. But then right after that is Strong Enough. And that really is a vocal highlight for her, because she does do a little falsetto, and she can kind of really be a little more expressive with her voice. And then No One Said It Would Be Easy, which is another big one, right? I mean, when I re-listened to this album, it really kind of caught me actually about the production, which was very interesting. Is it's not her voice was recorded the same way every time. Like No One Said It Would Be Easy actually creates, the production actually creates some atmosphere with it, because there's just a very slight either echo or reverb on her voice, which you don't hear on the other songs. So when you hear it, for me, all of a sudden it stood out. I'm like, oh wow, this sounds different than the other ways that the other songs were recorded.
Yeah, absolutely. I forgot how funky this album is. There's a lot of that kind of like stuff that I just love, that groove, right? That kind of groove stuff.
Yeah, Solidify.
Solidify is one of my favorite tracks.
What I Can Do For You. So she's got like this funky stuff, and then she can also go with the soft stuff. You mentioned the Na Na song. That's got there's actually I've got two songs that really have DNA from other artists on it. Besides Strong Enough, which is Fleetwood Mac, like to the max. There's two other songs. Not the Na Na song is basically Subterranean Homesick Blues rewritten. It's Dylan's, then I'm in the basement thinking about the medicine. It's her. It's the same.
You could be right about that.
Same type of thing. Yep. And then the other one, which is why I love it too, is All I Want to Do. Basically sounds like Stuck in the Middle by Steelers Wheel. It's kind of it has a lot of the same feel to it, and it's not an exact rewrite, but it when I first heard it back then, I was always trying to pinpoint it, and I was like, yeah, this kind of sounds like Stuck in the Middle.
There's enough there to recall that sound.
Exactly, without ripping it off. And maybe that's what makes this so accessible as well, is there's echoes of things from the past. It doesn't sound like Steelers Wheel. It doesn't exactly sound like Fleetwood Mac, but it's like it could fit. Which is so it's not like, oh, I'm doing a ripoff. It's more of an influence. I wouldn't even call it an homage. I would call it an influenced by.
Yeah, she knows what she likes. And that's key. I mean, that is exactly what she's recalling. She's recalling the music that we talked about this with Amy Winehouse too. Like she's doing exactly that. Her, is stuff that she could be listening to an entire jukebox of this kind of thing. And she would like, okay, I like a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and we'll put it together. And so we can make of it. And that's what she does on this album. And the second, and the Memphis album that I mentioned is all about the soul. It's all about the R&B flavor, the horns, the sort of the Memphis, that particular sound. But, she would go really specific on certain things, but with this thing, I love the, how eclectic it is.
Yeah. You actually get a little jazz on this as well with, We Do What We Can. It's kind of got that muted trumpet in there too.
Yes.
So just like you
Miles Davis there.
Yeah. So you're kind of listening to this, and you would think this would sound like it's all over the place, but it does. It's just because her voice, and maybe because she doesn't do a lot with her voice, that she's the thread through all of them that is bringing you on this journey. Yeah. Of she's kind of like the observer. So because she doesn't do like all kinds of weird stuff, it's like, oh, that doesn't sound like her in this song. It's kind of like it's Sheryl Crow throughout, but it's Sheryl Crow kind of journeying through or visiting different types of genres or different types of textures of music
Mm-hmm.
and she kind of gives you a little taste. It's almost like an audition. It's like, here's my first album. Here's kind of what I can. Here's like what I can do.
Exactly.
Right. It wasn't like it wasn't like we talked about the Killers, where it was like, oh, this was heavily influenced by one thing.
Right.
This was kind of like, here I am. This is, I'm all of these things. I'm not one of them, but I'm all of them.
Mm-hmm. And this is what I'm about. This is what I like. And that's,
she slid right into the classic rock.
She really did. She really, they often refer to her as like the hippie chick.
Yeah.
But I don't really see that as much. I don't really see her as this sort of psychedelic, like 60s kind of thing. She might have done, touched upon that with Come On, Come On, the sort of sunny album. Where really
Soak Up
poppy,
the Sun.
Soak Up the Sun. And it was recalling those types of tunes back in the day, perhaps like something like the Byrds and, that kind of thing. But yeah, she's a big fan of all this. That's Stones. She can go from like a Stones type song to a blues song, or hit the piano and do something really like sort of lounge even.
Super versatile.
The last track on the second album, as a matter of fact, which is so out of place but still good. People were critiquing that, like, I know some critics didn't like the way they closed that album out because it was just so like slow and jazzy compared to the rest of the album, which had a slightly more of a grunge feel that she was going for.
It was definitely heavier,
recalling that like Jagged Little Pill type vibe.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah. So, because that's where she was at that point.
Yeah.
So she wasn't afraid to embrace what was new either. Right. So she's, she's doing that as well. So
it just had that familiar, like you were like, oh, okay, this is just like a straight up rock and roll artist. Like she just kind of fit right in with that. And it wasn't like, oh, she had to kind of position herself. It almost kind of, for me, it felt like it was a very natural thing when I was listening to this album back in '93. I'm like, yeah, she's, especially when contrasted with In Utero and contrasted with Pearl Jam Versus and Smashing Pumpkins Siamese Dream, this firmly would be more rock centric than anything else that was going on. So when you also put it in the context of what was going on in the music scene when it came out, like I said, you had the rap stuff, you had Snoop Dogg's first album coming out, Tupac, all that stuff was coming out. So the only rock album I think I mentioned was Billy Joel, who at that point was kind of more adult, contemporary or adult.
Yeah, he was kind of carrying over. Yeah,
yeah, he was kind of on the by his own admission on the way out the door, right? Because he stopped pretty much making music after that, right? He stopped recording.
That's true. Yeah,
I think he had one album after that, right? I don't think River of Dreams was the last one.
No, I think it was.
It was? Okay,
I think so.
So that was kind of ending of an era.
That's right. And he did that classical album. Like
that doesn't count.
It doesn't count. No, he tried it. Hey,
put it this way. I don't. You know what? He didn't play anything from that classical album when I saw him in February. So,
okay, well there you go.
That should tell you everything that he thinks about it as well.
Well, he tried.
He tried. He gave it. So McCartney did the same thing too. He did the oratorio. And,
but why not though? I mean, Sting playing like old English instruments, going back to like the medieval times, playing like the old, like the what those weird instruments, like they weren't even guitar. They were like, what do you even call them? I don't even know.
When somebody mentions medieval times, I immediately think of the scene from Cable Guy when they go to medieval times. And he's like, do you have like a fork and knife? And Janine Garofalo was the waitress. She goes, there were no forks and knives in medieval times, but so there are no forks at medieval times. And he's like, but you have Pepsi? She's like pouring out the pitcher of Pepsi.
Yeah. Was that
and then Ben Stiller and Jim Carrey have that fight. And he's playing he's singing the music from Star Trek.
Oh, that's my favorite part. Yeah. And he nailed it too.
Yeah, he was doing the music like there. It was like, oh my god.
Oh my god,
sorry,
that's so great.
We took a little side turn, but anytime somebody mentions medieval times,
it all came out at the right time. At the same time, though. That's the thing. It's like all this alternative stuff that wasn't necessarily too nostalgic or too, calling back to something, too specific or too not hitting it over the head, but just sort of bringing this, rolling this. We talked about, going analog again. We talked about in our alternative hits episode, there are different facets of alternative music. I think this definitely fits into that category. I think we even mentioned it on the episode, did we not? I think you said wasn't Sheryl Crow's Tuesday Night Music Club? Do you consider that alternative, or it might have been off?
Yeah,
maybe
and definitely not. When I'm looking at what else was coming out in '93, absolutely not. And maybe that's why I connected to this, because I was listening to In Utero at the time, and I was listening to Pearl Jam Versus at the time.
Right.
But you hit the nail in the head. That music didn't necessarily owe anything to some music that came before, at least not the stuff that I was listening to. You could say had roots in punk, and some of that stuff. But as far as where I was enjoying that music, but not connecting it to something else. Whereas Sheryl Crow comes out, and I'm like, oh, okay, this is like an oasis in the middle of all this other music that I'm listening to, of new music. That's something that's new and contemporary, but calls back to stuff that I was very comfortable with. And that was, for me, like I said, I just played this CD just over and over.
Yeah.
It was like 93, 94, probably 94. It was probably when I got it, probably by the time All I Want to Do was a single. So that's 94. And
but
from there,
I recall that this also came out at the same time as like some of those other bands, like Mighty Mighty Boss Tones and like Bare Naked Ladies and these really quirky type of, like, I don't even know what to call it, like it, right? I mean, like Rusted Root and
Bill Boswell actually worked with Rusted Root. Actually, he would engineer them.
I'm not surprised, because you throw in all that stuff in there. You're throwing all of those influences in there. Different facets of different, and I love that. I just love when it's not something instantly in a box. Yeah, you can't categorize it necessarily. A lot of our favorite bands were like that. I think she hit that. I think she she definitely did.
Kind of had stuff that was different enough, that was her own, but familiar enough for somebody who was, listening to other stuff. But then the drought of the stuff I grew up on was there. There was no ELO happening at the time. There was no Fleetwood Mac happening at the time. So a lot of the stuff that I was liking was vacant, was not available. So I gravitated towards the alternative stuff. I started listening to that because there wasn't anything really that I was interested in that was coming out in the rock genre. And then she kind of pops out, and actually I think we talked about it on the Jewel episode, actually, that Sheryl Crow was like one of the forerunners to that whole women's musical movement. Right. Because then we talked about Sarah McLachlan, we talked about Alanis Morissette, and then we talked about Jewel because that came out the same year as Jagged Little Pill. So she was kind of supporting that as well. And I think she was on a couple of those little affairs.
Yeah, I definitely think she was. But when I said she was a lone wolf, I don't really remember her being so attached to that scene. I mean, she certainly was a strong proponent for women artists and things like that. But I didn't necessarily see her being put into that, like, touring with all of those.
Oh no, I get
women
that,
all the time. She definitely had her own little corner. And she just did things her way. Every album was different. Everything was, so. Whereas, some of those other artists, they kind of did, they kind of fell into that like ballady, type of thing where it was just more, these sort of sappy kind of songs and, that kind of, and would go off and do something like pop or whatever. Sheryl Crow remained true to her roots and to her interests in terms of like rock and roll. I think first and foremost, I think that's what I consider her to be is early rock and roll. Yeah. Influenced by that, so, but then again, she would even say, for like coming off the first album, she would say that I didn't want to be the denim wearing like hippie kind of thing. I wanted to go more darker, the leather jacket with the dark makeup and all that. Cause that's where I was at the time. That was the angst I was feeling, and in her own way, but not copying what everybody else was doing. She certainly wasn't Courtney Love or wasn't even trying to be like that, which I'm glad. She did it her way, which I think is really good. She touched upon it, but there it was. She was well within the time frame, but she just did things, very specifically her thing.
I think what I was trying to get across, I think she kind of set the table for that next generation of women artists, right? So she's not necessarily in that graduating class. We'll put it in quotes, of those type. But I think this album selling 7 million copies, winning three 3 Grammys and having 6 singles from it, you can't discount that she absolutely was making a statement, or people were ready for this. And I think that, so you're talking 94, Jagged Little Pill was what, 95, 96?
95.
Yeah. So it's right there.
Yeah.
It is, she is right on the cusp of that. And I think that she may have been like the first wave, and then the tsunami of Jagged Little Pill would come like crashing in.
Yeah. 95, but then her second record was 96.
Yeah.
Sheryl Crow. So yeah, she was definitely channeling, I think, I like to think of her as kind of like a hub, right? Where all this like different music is coming in on, every different which way.
And she can adapt it. She can adapt it without like, oh, here's kind of like the Jewel thing. When Jewel went that whole pop route, she got like eviscerated for it. But this seems a little bit different, where Sheryl Crow was able to kind of, because her first album was so eclectic, she can kind of go and do some stuff that's a little bit harder and experiment with some other things, because Tuesday Night Music Club was not just one thing. it has an overall feel to it, which I like, which, the production kind of, I think, grounds this album of as varied as the genres are. They don't feel like, oh, they're produced in different ways to match that. It does have an overall tone to it, which makes it easy to listen to, but it's just, you're getting different types of music experiences on it. Oddly enough, she is not in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and I don't think she's been nominated yet.
Not yet.
She is absolutely eligible. Her first album was 93.
Yeah.
So what do you got to be? It's got to be 20 years. So she was since 2013, and I don't recall ever seeing her on. I was so concerned with Styx getting in and ELO, that I never noticed if she's been on any of the ballot. Because Nirvana is in, so it's that era of getting in.
I'd like to think that it's not without trying, or at least other artists trying to push or have a strong, I know, like I said, she's a big fan of Stevie Nicks, and I know they're really good friends.
I think she'd be a shoo-in. I think she'd be a first ballot.
I'm sure Stevie probably was trying to push for her to be, or something, but who knows? I don't know.
Well, I just thought that was very strange. You would think,
she put out quite a few records. Enough. She's well within the public eye. She's still, still doing it.
Yeah.
I don't think she's making albums anymore, she said. I think she's just coming out with singles.
Yeah. And tours.
After her last record. Yeah. She's still touring.
And is out there absolutely touring and getting things done.
Which is very interesting, because she's, again, very much on the, has her finger on the pulse of what's going on in the music business today, which really nobody's really making albums, right? And everybody's, it's streaming. So she's like, I'm not even going to try and spend the money. Why do that when I can just write a few songs and just put them out? Cut
them out and have people stream the heck out of those, and not have to worry. And then, then when you tour, you just got to worry about doing the songs that you just put out for streaming.
Did you ever see her?
Kind of very clever.
Did you ever see her?
I wanted to, but never got around to it.
Yeah.
I would have liked to seen her back in the day.
Yeah. The only time I saw her was with Clapton's Crossroads.
Of course. Which here comes my girlfriend. No,
no, they were. I think they were done, but I think she was really. Honestly, her, Susan Tedeschi, and I think Alison Krauss and Union Station were the only female artists on that show, on that bill. And there was like 12 hours of there was like almost 30 artists playing that day, so they were the only 3 female artists that I guess.
Bonnie Raitt? Come on.
No,
you're talking female guitar players.
That's surprising. Yeah. Bonnie Raitt would have been a good fit, and I think maybe she did do a later one at some point. But but it's interesting. They're but she did Make You Happy, which I'm used to, like, all day long. I'm listening to like blues and jazz and all these like big like artists doing their thing, and then she comes out and does Make You Happy, which I thought was very interesting, because she could have picked something a little bit more apropos. She could have even
done a cover
of the day. Exactly. And she did, but she did go into some of the country stuff with Willie Nelson and Albert Lee, and then Clapton came out and they did Lay Down Sally together, which was nice. So, but that was like, she came out and she burst into that song, which I was glad, because that's my favorite song.
That's what you want to hear.
So,
she's there because she plays that type of music, not because they want her to do to do other stuff, right?
Right.
When you go to Clapton, you expect to hear some covers and
Mhm.
in addition to his originals. But with Sheryl Crow, she at that point, she had a nice catalog to choose from.
Yeah.
Where she could just pretty much kind of do anything. She actually did a cover of "Sweet Child of Mine" too, which was kind
she did.
kind of a minor hit for her. It sounded nothing like the Guns N' Roses version, and it's like, why would this song ever be covered in your life?
Well, again, probably just maybe
she Sheryl Crow'd it,
She Sheryl Crow'd it, and she's a fan. Like I guess she's and again, there's just that there was that rock and roll period. I mean, that's when she was doing stuff with Kid Rock.
Yeah,
I think it was around that same time.
She even covered Zeppelin. She did a version of Do You Make Her for the Encomium tribute album. So she was doing all kinds of.
Okay, yeah. You're right.
Oh,
Well, that's perfect for her. That's the perfect. If there's going to be any Zeppelin song to do, that would be the one. Yeah, no doubt.
That was me humming. It wasn't. I started singing and I stopped. So there you go.
Yeah,
take it away.
Don't have to go and
yeah. So she did that too. So she was absolutely like ingratiating herself with these artists and with these kind of like almost like not even asking to be part of the club, just assuming that she just kind of came in and said, you know what, this is what I am, and she just kind of, everyone just kind of took it for granted. Like, yeah, she's just a classic rock artist. And that she didn't have to kind of like prove it. It was kind of, everyone was just very open and accepting because she's such a great musician.
Yeah.
And she really did all these different kinds of things and just kind of opened herself to these different experiences like Crossroads or like you said, like, from Kid Rock to Guns N' Roses. I mean, how much more diverse,
you look at the credits on these albums and what she's playing. It's like, the list is like, it's like this. Guitar, bass, this, keyboards, and really getting like real specific Wurlitzer and synthesizer and this and that and synclavier and all, she's like really adept at all of this stuff. And that's amazing. Yeah.
Yeah. It all started with just a group of people that were kind of getting together, hanging out, like a collaborative thing, which you hear about all the time. It's like, hey, let's just kind of get together and write poetry, and have a little group that meets, and hey, let's get together and talk about screenwriting. There's all those groups all the time of people that just want to be with other people and bounce off ideas.
Yeah. Like-minded people. Yeah. Sure. Yeah.
And that's how this happened,
sort of like the beatniks or the coffee house people. And like poetry
kind of
reading.
A loose collective of people that were like, kind of, let's kind of get together since we got nothing else going on or whatever. Right. Let's just kind of, see what happens. And then she kind of comes into the fold, and then, it was almost like they lacked focus until she got there, and it's like, oh, let's work on, really putting together a really great album for her, so it's weird when she kind of came into the fold, all of a sudden there was some focus and some vision and something to work towards.
Yeah.
Unfortunate that it kind of blew up. She was kind of her own worst enemy in that case. Things did, tensions did subside over the years. So there was some fences that were mended, and some of the things that were said back at that time were walked back more recently by some of them. Like, we were a little butthurt, so it might have been more of an extreme reaction than what it was, and because at the time they were downplaying her contributions and she didn't really do this and that, and then now they're saying, yeah, no, she did do the lion's share of the work, and we wanted to,
right.
But it's
that's what it was about. I mean, it was pushing her to the center. So why would you not acknowledge that? And why can't she take the credit for some of that stuff? You know what I mean? Not to say like, oh, I wrote everything about this song, but it's like, but yeah, you take the credit because you did it, and that's what the whole thing was about for me. Might
have been a little bit of pride though, like, hey, like we all
but she
worked
became
on this
a star.
Together. Yeah,
and that's
we all worked
it
on
too.
this
There's
together.
ego. There's definitely ego involved there. I mean, sure, no doubt.
She's the one on David Letterman, and then when they're asking about it, she doesn't give the credit. So that that kind of been like that could have been like a
they're sitting in the same cellar, like
like what the hell. Like we help, and I can understand where there might be some hurt feelings along that if you poured your heart and soul into that as well, right? Because they're giving their ideas and they're giving their blood, sweat, and tears, and she's the one that kind of benefited from it, and justifiably so. It's not in any way saying that she was not deserving of anything, that it was a fluke, because obviously it wasn't. If you listen to the second album, it's all Sheryl Crow all the time. She wrote and she played everything to make that statement. Yeah. To kind of say, I'm an artist on my own as well. I've got my own ideas. I've got my own way of doing things. And she absolutely did. And that album, it wasn't as big as this one, but set her up. And then her other, she just had hit after hit after this. It was just kind of like, then it was just became like, oh yeah, Sheryl Crow.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah, but this getting back to this first album, and it's just so fun, such a pleasure to listen to again and revisit. And again, so quirky, so funny, in parts, like just those little moments are great. But also, you got Strong Enough. You got songs like that really are, a lot of emotion. So yeah, she could do it all. Would somebody listen to this today, do you think? Does it hold up in that sense, or do you consider it dated? Do you consider it
I didn't, you know what, that's a great question. I didn't think this didn't sound dated because it didn't have any of the, we were well past the 80s, and the 90s were more defined by grunge and by rap. So this, I think the production on this, there was no gimmicky synthesizers that you say, oh, this sounds like that, it sounds like this year. In that aspect, this was absolutely timeless. I listened to it and I'm like, yeah, this just kind of fits. It's, and especially since I hadn't listened to it in a while, I was kind of like, yeah, this is just a great experience. And it wasn't a nostalgia. We talk about sometimes, oh, this was a nostalgia listen. This wasn't, because it doesn't sound like, if you asked somebody when did this come out, I don't think they would say 93.
Yeah, I would buy that.
When did this come out? They could say the 90s. They could have said the 2000s.
Mm-hmm.
You could even have said the 2010s with the advent of some of the newer type of rock folk revival, like the Avett Brothers and Head and the Heart and some of these other groups.
Sure,
this could have fit right, fit in with that revival as well. So I'm not going to say it's timeless like in the universe, but absolutely would be hard to say this was from 93 if you weren't there when it came out. Was that fair?
That's fair. No, okay. I agree. I totally agree.
Do you concur?
Yeah. I concur, sir. Yes, sir.
That's a catch me if you can reference. If you concur,
you concur.
Do you concur, Doctor? Yes, I concur. And then he went home and watched Perry Mason or whatever the doctor show was to learn how to be a doctor. Anyway,
yeah.
This is an absolutely a must listen and absolutely a summer listen. As of the recording of this, warm weather is on the way, and this is just a great album to listen to when you're outside. Yeah, it just has that easy breezy feel to it. Her music just generally screams summery stuff. Not, I don't know why, but she just evokes like the summer to me and warm weather and. Maybe because I remember listening to this in the middle of the summer, it would be like blazing hot and this would be on and just kind of like, getting through it. And so for me, I connect heavily to like warm weather with this album. So, but that doesn't mean you can't listen to it whenever. It's better, better in the summer, right? Just like beer, it's better like in the summer when it's cold, like it's cold.
I think she knows that. That's why she did an entire album with, Come On, which was very sunny, and the cover, just like the glare off the cover, for God's sake.
Absolutely.
And McQueen, and that's some good stuff on there too. So, yeah,
you're not going to go wrong with Sheryl Crow. And this was the first one, like we said, 7 million copies out the door. So, if you never picked up on this one, we highly recommend you go check this out. It's absolutely available on streaming on Spotify, so you can check it out there. Yeah. And I think that's going to do it for this episode of the 3324 podcast. The Tuesday Night Music Club is adjourning, but the music is still there, so you can absolutely check it out. Let us know what your favorite songs are. Let us know if some of this stuff was a little Fleetwood Mac-y. Did it sound like Steelers Wheel? Let us know. And you know what? I'll drop a link for Stuck in the Middle with You in the show notes as well, so people can listen to that song. If you don't know, you know the song. If you're not sure of the title, you absolutely know the song. So we'll drop a link in there, and then I'll put a link for All I Want to Do, so you can actually listen to the two and compare them and let us know if there's just a little callback to it. Absolutely nothing wrong with it. Made it easier for me to listen to as well. So that'll do it for this episode of 3324 Podcast. Thank you so much for joining us. We absolutely appreciate it. We will see you real soon. And for Eric, this has been Dean. We will catch you on the flip side.
You've been listening to the 3324 Podcast with Dean Legiro and Eric Kuber. You can find us on your favorite podcast provider, so please like, subscribe, and rate to become a part of the 3324 family. Your feedback is important, so make sure to follow us on Instagram and Facebook at 3324 Podcast and on Twitter at 3324P to join the conversation.